yogurt cup moved. Not a gentle slide. Not a nudge from a passing breeze. It lifted 3 inches off the kitchen counter, hovered for 2 impossible seconds, then dropped with a wet splat onto the linoleum floor. Sarah Morrison stood frozen in the doorway of her boyfriend's grandmother's house, the Thanksgiving casserole dish still clutched in white-knuckled hands. The strawberry yogurt that had been sitting on the counter moments ago now lay in a pink puddle at her feet, its foil lid peeled back in a perfect circle. But that wasn't what made her blood run cold. It was the fingerprints. Small ones, child-sized, pressed into the yogurt's creamy surface in a pattern too deliberate to be accidental. 4 tiny fingers and a thumb, as if someone had scooped out a handful and simply vanished. The kitchen was silent. Completely, utterly silent, except for the distant hum of the television in the living room where the family gathered. No footsteps. No breathing. No giggling child running away after making a mess. Sarah's eyes traced the sticky trail leading from the spilled cup across the pristine tile floor. Small, barefoot prints, child-sized, heading toward the back staircase. The stairs that led to the bedrooms upstairs. Bedrooms that were supposed to be empty. She'd been alone in the kitchen. She was sure of it. The nearest child at this gathering was her boyfriend's 8-year-old cousin, currently planted in front of the TV with the other kids, shoes still on. So whose prints were these? Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Before we dive into today's true story, I need to know, where are you watching from? Are you home alone? Because after you hear what happened to Sarah that Thanksgiving morning, you might want to keep the lights on. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me if you've ever experienced something you simply couldn't explain. Trust me, you're going to need someone to talk to after this one. 3 days before Thanksgiving, Sarah Morrison had been looking forward to the holiday with the cautious optimism of someone meeting their boyfriend's extended family for the first time. She and Marcus had been dating for 8 months, long enough to warrant an invitation to the family gathering, but not quite long enough to feel completely comfortable about it. Marcus' grandmother, Dorothy Castellano, lived in a sprawling 2-story colonial in the suburbs of Millbrook, Connecticut. The house had been in the family for 3 generations, a fact that Dorothy mentioned with pride whenever given the opportunity. It was the kind of home that appeared in lifestyle magazines. Perfectly manicured lawn, wraparound porch, flower boxes that bloomed faithfully every spring. The kind of place where happy families made happy memories. Sarah had driven up from the city Wednesday evening, arriving just as the sun set behind the bare November trees. The house glowed warm and inviting from within, golden light spilling from every window. She could see silhouettes moving inside Marcus' parents, his sister's family, various aunts and uncles she'd only heard about in passing. Don't worry, Marcus had assured her during the drive. Grandma Dorothis, the sweetest woman you'll ever meet. The whole family's pretty laid back. Just be yourself. Sarah had smiled and nodded, but her stomach had been doing anxious flips regardless. First impressions mattered, especially with the grandmother. Everyone knew grandmothers were the real gatekeepers of family acceptance. That first evening had gone smoothly enough. Dorothy was indeed warm and welcoming, if a bit formal. She'd given Sarah a tour of the house, pointing out family photos that lined the hallway. Walls, generations of Castellanos smiling from their frames. Sarah noticed the photos seemed to skip a few years in the early 2010 seconds, but she didn't think much of it. Families had their reasons for such things. The house itself was immaculate. Every surface gleamed. Every corner smelled of lemon polish and cinnamon. Dorothy clearly took pride in her home, and it showed. The kitchen, where Sarah would later experience the impossible, was a chef's dream. Granite countertops, professional-grade appliances, a large island perfect for family gatherings. I do all the cooking myself, Dorothy had said with pride. 52 years in this kitchen, and I know every inch of it. That night, Sarah had slept in the guest room on the 2nd floor, a cozy space with floral wallpaper and a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud. Shed fallen asleep quickly, exhausted from the drive and the mental energy of meeting so many new people at once, but something had woken her around 2 a.m. Not a sound. Exactly. More like the feeling of a sound. The sensation that somewhere in the house, something had moved. Sarah had lain in the darkness, listening, but heard nothing more. Just the old house settling, Shed told herself. Old houses made noises. That was normal. Shed pulled the covers tighter and forced herself back to sleep. The next morning, Thanksgiving morning, Sarah woke early. Years of working the opening shift at her job had trained her body to rise before dawn, and holidays were no exception. Shed glanced at her phone. 6:47 a.m. The house was still silent. She could be the first one up, she thought. Maybe help Dorothy with breakfast preparations. A good way to earn points with the grandmother. Shed dressed quickly in jeans and a comfortable sweater, ran a brush through her hair, and padded downstairs in her socks, careful not to wake anyone. That's when she saw him. The boy stood in the kitchen, silhouetted against the early morning light filtering through the window above the sink. Sarah's first thought was relief. She wasn't the only early riser in the house. Her second thought was that he was adorable. The child looked to be about 5 or 6 years old, with a mop of dark curly hair that stuck up at odd angles. He wore flannel pajamas covered in cartoon rockets and planets, the kind with the attached feet that made shuffling sounds when kids walked. He was standing on his tiptoes at the refrigerator, one small hand gripping the handle, clearly trying to reach something on the upper shelf. His back was to her, and she could see his little shoulders straining with effort. "Hey there, buddy," Sarah said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Need some help." The boy didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge her at all. He managed to get the refrigerator door open and stood there for a moment, bathed in the cold white light from within. Then his hand reached up impossibly high for such a small child and grabbed something. A yogurt cup. Strawberry. From what Sarah could see, that's a good breakfast choice, Sarah said, smiling as she stepped further into the kitchen. "But maybe we should ask your mom or dad first, and I can help you open it if you..." The boy turned. Sarah's words died in her throat. His face was wrong. Not disfigured. Not monstrous, just wrong. The features were slightly out of proportion, like a photograph that had been stretched or compressed. His eyes were too large, too dark, and they didn't quite focus on her. They seemed to look through her, at something beyond. And his skin in the harsh light of the refrigerator, his skin had an odd, translucent quality. Not pale, exactly, but almost faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. But he was smiling, a sweet, innocent smile that crinkled those two large eyes at the corners. Sarah blinked, and the impression of wrongness vanished. He was just a kid. Just a tired, rumpled kid in rocket pajamas getting an early morning snack. Her mind was playing tricks on her, that was all. She'd been anxious about this visit, hadn't slept well, was probably more stressed than Shed admitted to herself. "Well, okay then," she said, forcing her voice to sound cheerful. "Strawberry's my favorite too." The boy didn't respond. He padded over to the kitchen counter, those shuffling footsteps that footed pajamas made, and set the yogurt down. Then he reached up to the drawer where the spoons were kept, pulled it open without hesitation, and selected a small spoon. He knew exactly where everything was. Of course he did, Sarah thought. This was his grandmother's house. He probably spent holidays here all the time. The boy climbed onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island, the yogurt cup in front of him. He peeled back the foil lid with careful, deliberate movements. Then he dipped his spoon in and took a bite, his legs swinging beneath the stool, not quite reaching the floor. Sarah watched him for a moment, feeling like she should say something, make conversation. But the boy seemed content in his own world. She decided to start making coffee, figuring the smell would eventually wake the other adults and Shed be seen as helpful rather than intrusive. As she measured grounds and filled the pot with water, she kept glancing at the boy. He ate his yogurt slowly, methodically, staring at nothing in particular. The early morning light caught his dark curls, making them glow at the edges. "What's your name?" Sarah tried again. "I'm Sarah. I'm here with Marcus, your uncle, I think? Or cousin?" No response. The boy took another spoonful of yogurt. Maybe he was shy. Or maybe had been told not to talk to strangers, which Sarah technically was. That was probably a good thing, actually. Responsible parenting. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the kitchen with its warm, familiar aroma. Sarah leaned against the counter and pulled out her phone, checking messages. Marcus had texted her goodnight the evening before, from his own childhood bedroom down the hall from hers. She smiled and sent back a quick good morning text. When she looked up, the boy was gone. The stool where He'd been sitting was empty. The yogurt cup sat on the counter, about half eaten, the spoon resting beside it. But the boy had vanished without a sound. Sarah glanced toward the doorway leading to the dining room, then toward the back hallway that led to the bathroom. She hadn't heard him leave. Those footed pajamas should have made noise on the tile floor. But there had been nothing. "Okay," she said aloud to the empty kitchen. Sneaky little guy. She walked over to the counter and picked up the yogurt cup, intending to throw it away. Kids were messy eaters. It was the polite thing to do. But when she lifted it, she noticed something odd. The yogurt around the rim where the foil had been peeled back, there was no residue. When you peeled foil from yogurt, there was always a little ring of product stuck to the inside of the lid, always a bit of mess. But this was clean. Perfectly clean. And the spoon beside it was completely dry. Not a trace of yogurt on it. Sarah's hands started to shake. She set the cup back down, staring at it. That wasn't possible. Shed watched him eat. Shed seen him take multiple bites. The yogurt level in the cup was definitely lower than it had been. She could see the residue line where it had been higher. Someone had eaten it. But the spoon was dry. Sarah backed away from the counter, her heart beginning to hammer in her chest. This didn't make sense. This couldn't make sense. Shed seen him. Had been right there. Real, solid. A little boy in rocket pajamas, eating strawberry yogurt in his grandmother's kitchen on Thanksgiving morning. Footsteps on the stairs made her jump. She spun around to see Marcus' mother, Patricia, entering the kitchen, already dressed for the day in slacks and a festive sweater. "Oh, good morning, Sarah," Patricia said cheerfully. "You're up early. I see you already started the coffee. How thoughtful." The little boy," Sarah stammered. "The one who was just here. He left his yogurt. I was going to." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "Little boy? Honey, what little boy?" "The one in the rocket pajamas. He was sitting right there." Sarah pointed at the empty stool. Dark curly hair, about 5 or 6. He was eating yogurt, and then just disappeared. The color drained from Patricia's face. She glanced at the yogurt cup on the counter, then back at Sarah, her expression suddenly stricken. "Sarah," she said quietly, "there are no little boys that age here this weekend. Marcus, sisters, kids are teenagers now. Everyone else's children are older or..." She trailed off, her eyes fixed on the yogurt cup. The rest of the family began filtering into the kitchen over the next hour, drawn by the smell of coffee and Patricia's cinnamon rolls that Shed started baking with mechanical, distracted movements. Sarah noticed she kept glancing at the yogurt cup, which still sat on the counter where Sarah had left it, like neither of them wanted to touch it. Sarah tried to push the encounter from her mind. She helped set out plates and napkins, made small talk with Marcus' aunt and uncle, laughed at his father's corny jokes, but her eyes kept drifting to that empty bar stool, and her mind kept replaying those shuffling footsteps, that too large smile, the way the boy had known exactly where the spoons were kept. Marcus found her in the dining room, setting out silverware. "Hey, you okay?" he asked, sliding an arm around her waist. "Mom said you had kind of a weird morning. Did she tell you what I saw? She said you thought you saw a kid in the kitchen. But babe, there are no little kids here. The youngest person at this gathering is Kyle, and he's 15. I know what I saw, Marcus. Sarah's voice came out sharper than she intended. I had an entire conversation with him. Well, one-sided, but still. He was eating yogurt. He was real. Marcus' expression shifted to concern. Maybe you were still half asleep? Sometimes when you're in an unfamiliar place, your brain can kind of fill in. I was fully awake. I made coffee. I checked my phone. I was not dreaming. Okay. Marcus held up his hands in surrender. Maybe it was Kyle playing a prank? Or one of the neighbor kids somehow got in. But even as he said it, Sarah could tell he didn't believe it himself. The house had been locked. Shed heard the alarm system's soft beep when Patricia had disarmed it upon entering the kitchen, and the boy had known where everything was, moved through the space with the confidence of someone who'd been there many times before. By mid-morning, the house was full of noise and warmth. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade played on the television in the living room. Football would come later. The kitchen was a flurry of activity as Dorothy directed the preparation of what seemed like enough food to feed a small army. Sarah threw herself into helping, grateful for the distraction. But the oddness continued in small, unsettling ways. At one point, Sarah was peeling potatoes at the sink when she heard the soft shuffle of footed pajamas on tile. She spun around, potato peeler held like a weapon, but the kitchen was full of adults. No children, no boy in rocket pajamas. You all right, dear? Dorothy asked from the stove, where she was basting the turkey. Yes. Sorry. Just jumpy, I guess. Later, while getting butter from the refrigerator, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the top shelf, pushed to the back, was a 6-pack of strawberry yogurt. 5 cups remained. One was missing. The same brand, the same flavor, the same position, top shelf, hard for a small child to reach that the boy had been straining toward that morning. Dorothy. Sarah's voice cracked slightly. Who eats these yogurts? Dorothy glanced over, saw what Sarah was pointing at, and her expression froze for just a moment before schooling itself into practiced neutrality. Oh, those. I keep them on hand. Someone's always wanting a snack. Why do you ask? But Sarah saw the lie in her eyes, saw the way Dorothy's hand trembled slightly as she returned to the turkey, saw the glance she exchanged with Patricia across the kitchen. They knew something they weren't saying. The hours crawled by. The massive Thanksgiving meal was finally ready around 2 in the afternoon, and the extended family gathered around the dining table, a table extended to its maximum length to accommodate everyone. Sarah found herself seated between Marcus and his cousin, facing the doorway that led to the kitchen. The meal was everything a Thanksgiving dinner should be. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce, 3 kinds of pie. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of silverware. Sarah tried to relax, to enjoy the moment, to forget about the morning's strangeness. But then, she saw him again, just a flicker of movement in her peripheral vision, a small figure in the doorway, watching her. Sarah's fork clattered to her plate. Several people looked at her in concern. Sorry, she murmured. Thought I saw. Nothing. Never mind. But when she glanced back at the doorway, the boy was gone. If had ever been there at all. After dinner, while the men watched football and most of the women relaxed in the living room, Sarah found herself volunteering to help clean up. She needed to do something. Needed to keep her hands busy and her mind occupied. Dorothy joined her in the kitchen, the two of them working in companionable silence for several minutes. Sarah washed while Dorothy dried and put away, a practiced rhythm that felt almost meditative. Dorothy, Sarah finally said, scrubbing at a stubborn bit of burnt stuffing on a casserole dish. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. The old woman's hand stilled on the towel she was holding. What is it, dear? This morning, when I saw that boy, Patricia acted like I'd seen a ghost. And you know about those yogurts on the top shelf. Someone was supposed to eat them. Someone who's not here anymore. Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then she set down the towel and leaned against the counter, suddenly looking every one of her 78 years. "You're a perceptive young woman," she said softly. "I can see why Marcus cares for you." Who was he? Dorothy's eyes grew distant, focused on something beyond the kitchen, beyond the present moment. His name was Tommy, my grandson, Patricia's son, Marcus' nephew. Her voice was barely above a whisper. He was 6 years old, such a bright, happy child. Loved science, loved space, loved those ridiculous rocket pajamas. Wore them until they were practically threadbare. Sarah's heart sank. Was 7 years ago, on a Tuesday morning in October. Dorothy's voice was steady but hollow, as if she'd told this story many times, but still couldn't quite believe it herself. Patricia was getting him ready for school. He ran outside to get in the car. He loved school, couldn't wait to go. She was just behind him, carrying his backpack, looking down at her phone for just a second, just 1 second. Sarah set down the dish she was holding, her hands suddenly too shaky to trust. The driver said the sun was in his eyes, said he didn't see Tommy run between the parked cars into the street. Tommy was so small, so fast. Dorothy's voice cracked. He died right there, right in front of this house, right in front of his mother. "Oh my God," Sarah breathed. Patricia never forgave herself, still hasn't. Marcus doesn't talk about it. He was away at college when it happened, but it tore the whole family apart. We don't keep photos up anymore. Too painful, especially for Patricia. We packed them away years ago. Dorothy finally looked at Sarah, and there were tears in her eyes. "But I see him sometimes," she whispered. "Just glimpses. Always in the morning, like he's getting ready for school. Always in those rocket pajamas. And always reaching for the strawberry yogurt on the top shelf. His favorite breakfast." Sarah felt the room spin slightly. The others. Do they see him too? If they do, they don't say so. They think I'm a grief-stricken old woman who can't let go. Maybe I am. But I know what I've seen. I know my grandson when I see him. Even if, she paused, even if he's not quite the same as he was. "What do you mean?" Dorothy wrapped her arms around herself. His eyes, they're not quite right, not quite focused. And his skin has this quality, like he's fading, like he's caught between here and somewhere else. But it's him. I know it's him. "The yogurt this morning," Sarah said slowly. "The one he was eating. The spoon was completely dry. How is that possible?" "I don't know, dear. I've stopped trying to understand it. All I know is that sometimes, on special occasions when the family gathers, he comes back, just for a little while. Just to remind us he's still." She couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah's mind reeled. She wanted to tell Dorothy it was impossible, that ghosts weren't real, that there had to be a logical explanation. But she'd seen him. She'd watched him eat that yogurt, watched him move through the kitchen with purpose and presence. She'd heard the shuffle of his feet, seen the smile on his too large face. "Why me?" Sarah asked. "Why did I see him when no one else seems to?" Dorothy managed a sad smile. "Maybe because you're new. You don't have the same walls up that the rest of us do. Or maybe," she reached out and squeezed Sarah's hand, "maybe he wanted someone to see him. Someone who would believe. Someone who would remember him the way he was just a little boy, who loved strawberry yogurt and rocket ships." The conversation with Dorothy left Sarah shaken. She excused herself and went upstairs, needing space to process what she'd learned. The guest room felt different now, no longer cozy, but somehow watchful. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. A 6-year-old boy, dead for 7 years. Hit by a car in front of this very house. And his grandmother saw him, still saw him, reaching for his favorite breakfast, wearing his beloved pajamas, moving through the home where he'd spent countless happy holidays. Sarah pulled out her phone and did what any rational person would do in the age of information. She searched. Thomas Castellano, accident Millbrook, Connecticut, 2016. The results loaded, and her stomach dropped. There were news articles, local coverage of the tragedy. A small photo of Tommy alive, grinning at the camera, gap-toothed and bright-eyed, wearing a NASA t-shirt, the same dark curls, the same smile Shed seen in the kitchen that morning. The articles described the accident exactly as Dorothy had. A terrible moment of inattention, a driver blinded by the morning sun, a small boy running between cars. The date, the 18th of October 2016. A Tuesday morning. Tommy had died on impact, but it was the memorial page that broke her. Someone had created an online memorial for Tommy, filled with photos and messages from family and friends. Sarah scrolled through them, tears blurring her vision. Here was Tommy at his 5th birthday party, face covered in chocolate cake. Tommy at the beach, building sandcastles. Tommy in his school's Halloween parade, dressed as an astronaut. And there, near the bottom of the page, was Tommy in the rocket pajamas. The same ones Shed seen that morning. Flannel, covered in cartoon planets and stars, with the attached feet. His mother had posted it with the caption, "His favorite. He wore them until I had to hide them to wash them." Sarah's hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Shed seen a ghost. A real ghost. Not a figment of her imagination. Not a half-asleep hallucination. A genuine, honest-to-God spirit of a dead child, replaying his morning routine in the home where He'd been happy. A soft sound made her look up. The door to her room, which Shed closed behind her, was now open. Just a crack. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't heard it open. Hadn't heard any footsteps in the hallway outside. "Hello." Her voice came out as barely a whisper. No response. But through the crack in the door, she could see movement in the hallway. A small shadow passing by the light from downstairs. Shuffle, shuffle, shuffle. The sound of footed pajamas on hardwood. Every rational part of Sarah's brain screamed at her to stay in the room, to call for Marcus, to do anything except follow that sound. But something else, curiosity, compassion, or perhaps just the human need to understand the impossible, made her stand up. She walked to the door and pulled it open. The hallway was empty, but at the far end, the door to what looked like another bedroom was swinging shut, its hinges creaking softly. Sarah had been told not to go into that room during her tour. Dorothy had simply said it was storage and moved on quickly, but Patricia's expression when they'd passed it had been pained. It was Tommy's room. Sarah knew it without being told. She walked down the hallway, each step feeling like it took an eternity. The sounds of football and conversation drifted up from downstairs, normal, everyday sounds of a family gathering. But up here, in this hallway, the air felt thick and cold, like walking through water. Sarah reached the door, placed her hand on the knob. It was ice cold. "Tommy," she whispered. "Are you in there?" For a long moment, nothing. Then, from inside the room, a soft sound. Not quite a voice, but not quite silence either. Like wind chimes heard from far away. Sarah turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was dim. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through drawn curtains. But she could see it had been preserved exactly as a 6-year-old boy would have left it. The bed was made with a space-themed comforter. Model rockets lined shelves on the walls. Posters of planets and astronauts covered every available surface. A small desk held coloring books and crayons, as if Tommy might sit down to draw at any moment. And there, in the center of the room, sat the boy. He was on the floor, playing with toy spaceships, moving them through the air in swooping patterns. He looked solid, real, more present than he had that morning in the kitchen. His dark curls caught the dim light. His rocket pajamas looked soft and worn. He didn't look up at Sarah, didn't acknowledge her presence. He was lost in his play, in his own world, making soft whooshing sounds as he flew his ships past imaginary planets. Sarah's eyes burned with tears. This wasn't a monster. Wasn't something to fear. This was just a little boy who loved space and strawberry yogurt and wasn't ready to leave the world head known. A little boy who came back on holidays, when his family was together, when the house was full of warmth and love, and the smell of his grandmother's cooking. "I see you," Sarah said softly, "and ill remember you." The boy's hands stilled on his spaceships. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head to look at her. His eyes were wrong, too large, too dark, not quite focused, but his smile was pure and sweet and heartbreakingly innocent. He looked at her for one long moment, as if trying to memorize her face. Then he faded, not suddenly, not like a light switching off. He simply became less solid, less present, until he was nothing more than a shimmer in the air, and then nothing at all. Sarah stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, staring at the empty spot where a ghost had been. Sarah didn't remember walking back downstairs. She found herself in the living room, Marcus beside her on the couch, his arm around her shoulders. Someone had placed a cup of tea in her hands, the warmth barely registering through her numb fingers. Dorothy sat in the chair across from her, her wise old eyes knowing. "You went upstairs," she said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. "And you saw him again." Another nod. Patricia, who'd been listening from the doorway, made a soft sound, half sob, half gasp. She sank into the nearest chair, her face crumpling. In his room, he was playing, Sarah managed to say. With his spaceships, he looked happy. Patricia covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent tears. Her husband, who Sarah had barely spoken to all day, moved to her side, wrapping his arms around her. "I'm so sorry," Sarah said, fresh tears spilling down her own cheeks. "I didn't mean to upset anyone. I just..." "No," Patricia said, lowering her hands. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "No, don't apologize. God, I've wanted to see him so badly. For 7 years I've prayed, wished, hoped, for just one more glimpse. But he never appeared to me." "Maybe," Dorothy said gently. "It would be too painful, dear, for both of you." The room fell silent, except for the muted sound of football from the TV. The rest of the family seemed to sense something important was happening and kept their distance, their conversations hushed. Marcus pulled Sarah closer. "Are you okay?" he whispered. Was she? Sarah didn't know. She'd seen the impossible, witnessed something that defied everything she understood about reality. A dead child, still tethered to the home where had been loved, replaying the simple joy of a holiday morning. "He wanted someone to see him," Sarah said, echoing Dorothy's earlier words. "Someone who wasn't carrying all that grief. Someone who could just see him for what he was. A little boy." Patricia nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Thank you for that. Thank you for seeing my son." As the evening wore on and the family gradually returned to their normal Thanksgiving activities, Sarah felt the atmosphere in the house shift. It was as if acknowledging Tommy's presence, speaking his name aloud, remembering him not just as a tragedy but as a real child with favorite foods and beloved pajamas had lifted some long-held burden. Before bed, Sarah found herself back in the kitchen, staring at the refrigerator. The yogurt cup from that morning had been washed and recycled, but the 5 remaining cups still sat on the top shelf, right where Tommy would have reached for them. On impulse, Sarah took one down. Strawberry. She peeled back the lid, got a spoon, and took a bite. It was sweet and cold and perfectly ordinary, but somehow, in that moment, it felt like sharing breakfast with a friend she'd never really met. The Thanksgiving weekend ended uneventfully. Sarah said her goodbyes to the family, received warm hugs from Dorothy and even Patricia, and promised to visit again soon. The drive back to the city with Marcus was quiet, contemplative. They'd talked about what happened, but there wasn't much to say. Sarah had seen Tommy. That was simply a fact they both had to accept. Life returned to normal. Work, routines, the mundane rhythm of everyday existence. Sarah found herself thinking about Tommy often, but the fear had faded. In its place was a kind of melancholy wonder shed touched something beyond the veil, glimpsed the impossible, and lived to tell about it. 3 weeks later, Sarah received a package. There was no return address, but the postmark was from Millbrook, Connecticut. Inside, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was a framed photograph. It showed Tommy on what must have been his last Halloween, dressed in a full astronaut costume, complete with a helmet under his arm. He was grinning at the camera, gap-toothed and radiant. And there, in the background, barely visible through a window, was a woman's reflection, Patricia, watching her son with an expression of pure love. A note was tucked beneath the frame, written in Dorothy's elegant cursive. "Dear Sarah, Patricia wanted you to have this. She said you were the only one who really saw him as he was, not as the tragedy we lost, but as the joy we had. Thank you for giving her that gift. I wanted to tell you something else, something I didn't mention at Thanksgiving. The yogurts on the top shelf, I buy them fresh every week. Have been for 7 years. And every week, one goes missing. Not eaten, exactly. Just gone. The cup is still there, still sealed, but empty. Like the yogurt was never inside at all. I thought you should know. Whatever Tommy is now, wherever he is, he's still finding his way back for his favorite breakfast. And that brings me more comfort than you could possibly imagine. With love, Dorothy." Sarah set down the note with trembling hands. She looked at the photograph, at Tommy's bright eyes and happier smile, and felt something twist in her chest. That night, she had a dream. She was in Dorothy's kitchen again, early morning light streaming through the windows. And there was Tommy, standing on his tiptoes at the refrigerator, reaching for the top shelf. But this time, when he turned to look at her, his eyes were clear and focused. Normal. Human. He smiled that same sweet, gap-toothed smile and held up the yogurt cup as if to show her. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. His voice was high and childlike, exactly as it should have been. "Most people can't anymore. I see you," Sarah replied in the dream. "I'll always see you." Tommy nodded, satisfied. Then he opened the yogurt and took a bite with a spoon that materialized in his hand. Real this time, not dry, not strange, just a little boy enjoying his breakfast. "I have to go soon," he said between bites, "but I come back sometimes, for the holidays, for Grandma. She needs to know. I'm okay. Are you?" Sarah asked. "Okay." Tommy considered this, his young face thoughtful. "Yeah," he said finally. "I miss everyone, but I'm not scared anymore, and the yogurt here is better than anywhere else." He laughed a bright, beautiful sound, and Sarah woke up. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. 2 months later, Christmas came. Sarah received a text from Dorothy. "He was here this morning, wearing his rocket pajamas. Thank you for believing." And in Dorothy's kitchen, on the top shelf of the refrigerator, another yogurt cup sat empty, still sealed, still perfect, but completely hollow inside. Some ghosts, Sarah had learned, don't haunt. They just visit. And sometimes they stay for breakfast.